Hello, and welcome to Cemetery Stories, Capital Connections Edition, Season 3. I'm your host, Capital Eric, and I'm a tour guide here at Sacramento Historic City Cemetery, as well as the California State Capitol Museum, a unit of California State Parks, just up the road. And today I'd like to tell you about one of our permanent residents here at the cemetery, someone who is connected in life or in death with the state capitol or federal or local government. Now, you caught me right in the middle of my reading time. My latest volume from the state library, recommended by the state librarian himself, is all about symbols you might see in a cemetery. Did you know a closed book on a tombstone might symbolize the end of life? Books might also symbolize the deceased's occupation in life, or simply a love of books or a good education. Would you like to see what's next? Read on, McDuff. That's a good one. You've all heard of John Sutter, right? Founder of Sutter's Fort, the destination of thousands of immigrants to California, sent rescue expeditions to the Donner Party. Gold was discovered by James Marshall while he was constructing a sawmill for Sutter on the South Fork of the American River, and, you may not know, donated the first 10 acres of what would become Sacramento Historic City Cemetery. This is not his grave. This is the grave of his son, John Sutter Jr., founder of the City of Sacramento, but it is the father I wish to tell you a little about today. Born on the German-Swiss border in 1803, the elder Sutter arrived in California in 1839 and was given the largest land grant area allowable under Mexican law, over 48,000 acres. He soon began construction of his fort, the administrative center of his empire, on a rise near the confluence of the Sacramento and American rivers, but not too near. He knew that while the rivers could provide transportation and fresh water, the Sacramento and the American could easily overflow their banks and inundate the region. With the tall, thick brick walls of his fort, an armed guard made up of Native Americans, and the only cannon in the area mounted on a very mobile carriage, the equivalent of owning the only tank around, Sutter was, in his own words, everything: patriarch, priest, father, and judge over his personal kingdom. Something else the rivers could provide was power for a sawmill, and Sutter decided to construct one to provide wood for the quickly expanding San Francisco. But what should have made him a small fortune instead led to his ruin when the word got out that gold was discovered on the American River. Gold seekers descended from all over upon Sutter's land, trampling on or eating his crops and slaughtering his cattle for meat. Squatters, who didn't care much for the legitimacy of Mexican land grants, took hold of early Sacramento. But more on that in another episode. The elder Sutter, drowning in debt — it's not cheap to build an empire from scratch — put his son, John Jr., in charge. Jr. hired surveyors to divide the area surrounding the fort into city blocks to be sold for development into what would become the modern city of Sacramento. The son was either unaware of the regular flooding of the valley, or he just didn't care. His father's creditors were demanding that Sutter pay back the money he borrowed, and he needed money. Fast. Either way, John Sutter Jr. became the founder of Sacramento, the indomitable city. Getting back to the elder Sutter, he entered the race to become the first American-era governor of California. In the November 1849 election, despite his well-known name and his role as a founding father of California, he came in third, winning just 15.49% of the vote to the winner's 47.72%. So now it is a portrait of Peter Burnett, first governor of California, that hangs in the Capitol. Sutter's portrait did hang in the Assembly chamber for many years until it was decided to put a national rather than a parochial figure in such a prominent position, and he was replaced by Abraham Lincoln in 1909. So much for the man who was patriarch, priest, father, and judge. Sutter Sr. died in 1880 at the age of 77, and is buried in the Moravian Cemetery in Lititz in southeastern Pennsylvania. Sutter Jr. moved to Acapulco, where he became the U.S. consul to Mexico in 1870. He was buried there after his death in 1897 at the age of 70, but was reinterred here in Sacramento Historic City Cemetery upon the request of his only surviving daughter, Anna Sutter Young, in 1964. Like he did with his fort, the elder Sutter had laid out the cemetery on high ground to prevent flooding. Little did his son know that he would be able to take advantage of that fact over a century later. Well, that closes the book on another chapter of Cemetery Stories, Capital Connections Edition, Volume 3. I'm your host, Capital Eric, and it's been my pleasure telling you a little bit about City Cemetery as well as the state capitol. Now, unfortunately, during the pandemic, the California State Capitol Museum, a unit of California State Parks, is closed to the public. City Cemetery remains open for a solitary stroll or some quiet contemplation. Remember, keep up the social distancing, wash your hands, because it is better to be 6 feet apart than 6 feet under. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Goodbye.